So this is a repeat of the discussion of strategic entry preemption that we did in connection with the Alcoa case. So the critical issue in Alcoa is the way in which, according to Judge Hand, Alcoa used its choices of capacity to effectively extend its monopoly power. Now, as we discussed in class yesterday, there's not clear how much evidence there is of that, and the way Hand describes it, which is, how could Alcoa didn't have to be always ready to meet whatever demand emerged. It's sort of almost extraordinary to put it that way, in the sense that we think that's, in some sense, exactly what we'd like a a firm to do. As I indicated yesterday, Alcoa seems just the opposite of sort of a lazy, unresponsive monopolist on that characterization. Nonetheless, as we did in class yesterday, it's worth playing through this idea of how capacity choices can affect entry choices. And that'll let us do a little game theory at the same time. That'll let us look at two different solution concepts we see in game theory. So one of those is the idea of a Nash equilibrium, which is well known and important, if ultimately only so helpful. And then the other idea is one of backwards induction, which can be helpful, but the Nash idea and the backwards induction idea apply to different situations. So here's the situation. We've got an incumbent. This is based upon a hypothetical that we do in our game theory in the law book. And the incumbent is in the cement business. And right now, the incumbent is earning $25 per period from its activities. And the incumbent is deciding whether or not to expand its operations, to add capacity. Again, capacity choices seem to be at the heart of Judge Hand's focus in Alcoa. Okay, so it can either leave the plant alone or it can expand it. And the incumbent's also aware there's a potential entrant. And the entrant can go into the cement business, thereby effectively also adding capacity to the cement business, or can go into manufacturing business. And the point of game theory is to, as I said yesterday, is to operate in this middle ground between monopoly and competition. So if we think of competition as being characterized by people who are price takers, they don't think they can affect market prices, so they don't try to internalize market prices. If monopoly is a situation where you're a price setter and you internalize the consequences of your decision for what happens in the market, game theory sits in the middle. Situations where you recognize that what you do as an actor will affect what your counterpart does, and vice versa. And so it's a small number situation, 2, 3, 4, and that's what we're focusing on here. So here I've got two players, as it were, the incumbent facing this potential expansion decision, and the potential entrant. And we have to figure out in that situation, how their decisions would interact and what the profits would be for each of them under different choices. So these numbers are obviously all just made up, but the basic idea is if nothing happens to capacity in the cement business, then the incumbent continues to earn the $25. And that will arise if the incumbent doesn't expand the cement plant and the entrant goes into manufacturing. In contrast, if the entrant's going to go into manufacturing, the incumbent could actually make more money by expanding the plant. There's additional demand out there, but it could be satisfying. That would make 30. At the same time, if the entrant goes into the cement business, adding capacity, well, all of a sudden that's going to make that business more competitive. And if the incumbent doesn't expand its plant, then the incumbent makes $10 per period. But if we even add more capacity, so both the incumbent and the entrant are adding capacity in the cement business, then profits for the incumbent really drop, and that gets us down to the 5. Do a similar thing for the entrant. So the entrant can go into manufacturing and make $10 per period from that. The entrant will make $15 if the entrant goes into the cement business and the incumbent doesn't expand capacity, and then will make $5 if the entrant goes into the cement business and expands capacity, and the incumbent expands capacity, where we get this big jump in capacity for production. Okay, we can represent all of that in a table, and this is a standard what we call in game theory normal form game. It represents the idea that we have two players, the incumbent and the entrant. Each of them has two choices, so it makes it a 2-by-2 game. And the moves are made simultaneously. They can't watch each other. They make the decision at the same time, and that's what this captures. And then what we've taken is taken the payoff information that I just talked through as a function of their choices and represented those in the 2-by-2 normal form game table. So now the question is, how should we think about a potential solution to this? And the Nash equilibrium idea associated with John Nash, Nobel Prize winner for game theory and economics, the subject of A Beautiful Mind. If you haven't seen it, worth seeing. The idea there is that what I should do is we should be looking for choices where I'm happy with my choice given your choice and vice versa. It's a kind of stability, self-fulfilling, that if I knew you were going to make a choice, then I would make the choice that I make. And given the choice that I'm going to make, you would make the choice that I thought you were going to make. That's the idea of a Nash equilibrium. I'm happy with my strategy given your strategy and vice versa. So think about this way. So the incumbent is trying to figure out what to do. And the incumbent should say, well, look, if I knew what the entrant were going to do, what would I do? So if I knew that the entrant were going to, for example, enter into the cement business, then I, as the incumbent, well, look, I can not expand my capacity, and if I don't expand my capacity, then I will get a profit of 10. And that's, you can see where the green arrow is there. Yes, the green arrow, good. In contrast, if the entrant is going to enter the cement business and I expand capacity, then I'm going to get a profit of 5. So from my perspective, if I thought the entrant was going to go into the cement business, I can get 10 by not expanding, 5 by expanding. I'm better off not expanding. But I don't know what the entrant's going to do that. What if I thought the entrant was going to go into the manufacturing business? Well, in that circumstance, then, I get 25 if I don't expand capacity. That's what I've been getting. But I also recognize that if he's not going to enter the cement business, then it's actually profitable for me to expand capacity. And I could take capacity to 30. And so if I thought the entrant was going to go into manufacturing, that's what I'd do. I'd expand capacity. So I figured out what my strategy would be given the possible choices of the entrant, but of course I still haven't figured out what the entrant's going to do. At the same time, we know that the entrant is going through the same process. The entrant's saying, well, okay, what should I think about what the incumbent is doing? And as a function of what the incumbent is doing, what would I do? So if I'm the entrant and I look at this and I say, well, look, if I knew the incumbent were going to not expand capacity, well, then I could enter the cement business and make 15. Or I could go into manufacturing and make 10. If I knew he were going to not expand, then I'd want to enter the cement business and make 15. Of course, I don't know if he's going to do that. If I thought he were going to expand capacity in the cement business, well then, I would make 5 by also adding capacity. I'd do better to go in manufacturing and make 10, so that's what I would do. And the two squares, the diagonal choices where I've got the red and blue lines, those are both situations that are what we would call pure strategy Nash equilibria. Pure strategy in the sense that we're not allowing for randomization. We're just having our players make particular choices. And the nature of each of these is that if the entrant knew that the incumbent were not going to expand, then the entrant would enter the cement business. And if the incumbent knew that the entrant was going to enter the cement business, the incumbent wouldn't expand. And that's the sense in which the not expand enter choice is self-consistent. The expectations and the results are self-consistent. And that's what makes that a pure strategy Nash equilibrium. The great problem here, of course, and we encounter this frequently with Nash equilibria, is that we have two pure strategy Nash equilibria. Both the not expand enter choices are Nash equilibria, but so are expand and enter. It's just the off diagonal, which are not equilibrium outcomes here. And so if we want to actually know what happens, and if we hope that the game theory analysis will do more than just help us organize the discussion, but will actually tell us what's going to happen, it doesn't do it here because of the fact that we've got multiple Nash equilibria. And that's what this side says. And the question then is what to do. Maybe the thing to do is to try to change the game. So what we want to focus on next is how does the game look different if instead of playing a simultaneous move game, we work with basically the same technologies, but instead of that, we move to a situation where we have sequential moves. That means we've changed the way in which we graphically represent the game. So we've moved from our 2x2 box, the normal form game, to what's called an extensive form. That looks like sort of a decision tree, except it's an interactive or strategic decision tree, and that we've got two people making choices. So at node 1, the entrant in this version of it, we're going to have the entrant move first, and at node 1, the entrant's going to make a choice. And then at nodes 2 or 3, the incumbent's going to make a choice, so that's going to be the structure. And so we have represented here, we've got the same choices. The entrant either goes into manufacturing or goes into the cement business. We've got the same choices for the incumbent, which is either to expand capacity for its cement plant, aluminum plant if we're really doing Alcoa, or not, to keep current capacity. All right, so how should we think about the solution to this game? Well, the solution concept we want to use here is something called backwards induction. And in backwards induction, what we do is we have the entrant, the first player here, look forward in the game a little bit and say, well, look, if I enter the cement business, then I'm going to put the incumbent at node 3. And if the incumbent's at node 3, then the incumbent's going to face this choice of expanding or not expanding. And well, what should I think the incumbent will do in those circumstances? Well, the incumbent, and the incumbent's payoffs are the second payoffs in this version of it. The incumbent can expand and get 5, as before, meaning that this is a situation where first the entrant goes into the cement business and then the incumbent would expand. The incumbent would make 5 at that point. The alternative is to not expand. And what's different about this game versus the first game is precisely that the incumbent has a chance to, as a second mover, to observe the first player's move. And once the incumbent observes that the entrant has gone into the cement business, then adding more cement capacity is not a very good choice for the incumbent. And so the incumbent doesn't do that. And so the entrant understands that if she selects the right part of the path, entering the cement business, well, that'll put the incumbent at node 3, and then once the incumbent's at node 3, the incumbent's gonna not expand. In similar fashion, the entrant can say, okay, so what would happen if I took the alternative path? What would happen if I went into manufacturing? And if I went into manufacturing, then I would be putting the incumbent at node 2. And now, what would the incumbent do? And of course, the answer is, once the incumbent observes that I haven't entered into the cement business, then the incumbent wants to expand capacity in the cement business. Profits of 30 exceed profits of 25. So the entrant can observe, can look forward into the game tree and figure out what the incumbent would do given the choices after the entrant makes her selection. So what should the entrant do? Well, now having figured that part of the tree out, having figured out what the incumbent would do, the entrant should say, well, look, I can enter the cement business, and if I enter the cement business, I'm going to go down this path, and then the incumbent's going to take me down that path, and I would make 15. The alternative for me is I can go into manufacturing. If I do that, that's going to put the incumbent at node 2, and then the incumbent's going to work its way down to this point, and I'll get payoffs of 10. So given that, I should enter the cement business. I should make the first move. I should grab the capacity that's available. The incumbent will recognize that adding more capacity after I've added capacity doesn't work very well, and that works out best for me. And that's what we just said. Of course, that was a situation where I made it possible for the entrant to move first, and now the obvious question is what happens if the incumbent moves first? Taking the same choices, now I've flipped the extensive form around. I've given the incumbent the chance to move first. That means the payoffs have flipped around, so now the payoffs in the bottom, the first payoff goes to the incumbent, the second goes to the entrant. Now we want to play this through the same analysis, and the same analysis is going to say, okay, if I am the incumbent and I move first, if I put the entrant at node 3, then the entrant, when I haven't expanded the cement business, the entrant's going to say, well, that's a great situation for me to go into the cement business as the entrant. 15 exceeds 10, and therefore the entrant would go down that path if I chose to put him at node 3. Similar fashion, I can sit here as the incumbent and say, well, look, if I were to choose to expand capacity, then the entrant's going to have seen my capacity expansion. At that point, it makes no sense for the entrant to add capacity to the cement business. Entrant's going to go into manufacturing. So that's what's going to happen if I put the entrant at node 2. So what should I do then? And the answer is, well, look, I can move first here. And in moving first here, I add capacity. Once I've added capacity, the entrant doesn't add capacity, and now I get the payoff of 30. So this is a situation where, unlike the Nash equilibrium game, the simultaneous move game, where we had two outcomes, both of which are effectively the outcomes we just saw in the extensive form games, we couldn't say much about which of those would arise. We had two pure strategy Nash equilibria. It didn't seem to have a solution. Once we introduce a sequence here, once we move from simultaneous moves to sequential moves, that's then when we actually get well-defined outcomes, and we see the consequences of that. And now that circles back to Alcoa. Now we start to see the idea that you might have a first mover advantage in capacity expansions as the incumbent. That's sort of Hand's story, that Alcoa always builds capacity, has capacity on hand, and now we see the way in which having that kind of capacity might effectively bar, block, exclude, let's decide what antitrust word you want to use, capacity expansions by a potential entrant. Obviously, the hard problem there is how you would begin to run an antitrust system which separates out legitimate capacity expansions that we want the incumbent and leading firm to do from those which we think are being done because of their strategic exclusionary possibilities. And there's nothing in Alcoa which gives us much of any sense as to how to think about that problem. So in that sense, what the game theory does is the game theory sort of lays out a story about how this might work. But I think on the ultimate antitrust question confronted by Judge Hand and Alcoa, it doesn't really offer us a precise answer.